Everyone thought she was dead, even Chike Leko herself. On the wedding day, Asha Wekesa disappeared without a trace in front of everyone, as if she had evaporated from this world. No one could explain how Asha left, and no trace was left behind. The police investigated for 3 years, but the body was never found. Chike finally accepted the reality and slowly let go of the past. In the 4th year, Chike became engaged to Asha's sister, Nia Wekesa. Friends and family all said that it was time to start over, and Chike tried to believe it. They decided to make Pattaya, Thailand their first stop on their honeymoon. That night, the tour guide mysteriously suggested taking them to see a show of human limits. The show was held in a secret underground space, like a theater converted from an abandoned factory. The lights were dim, and the air was filled with a mixture of damp, musty, and rotten odors, as if one had just woken up from a nightmare. The creatures that appeared on the stage one after another did not look like humans, nor did they look like complete animals. They are more like some kind of terrible puzzle. Some have no legs, but have a mouth growing on their abdomen. Some have their backs twisted into an S shape, and their limbs are bent and dancing like spiders. Chike watched for a while, and felt a strong discomfort in his heart. He was about to get up and leave. But just as Chike turned around, a figure in an iron cage suddenly caught his attention. That face. The moment Chike saw it clearly, he felt as if struck by lightning. It was her, Asha. Her face had hardly changed, still the familiar look that Chike was familiar with, but her body seemed to have been spliced together in some morbid way. It was not the outline of a human being, but more like a rag doll that had been randomly stitched together, twisted and incomplete. Nia stood next to Chike. Her whole body seemed to be frozen, standing still. Chike's nails almost broke his palm. Asha's disappearance, for years ago, may not have been a disappearance at all. Perhaps, from the very beginning, I was led into the cage behind the stage. But Chike turned away. Chike's wife, Asha Wekesa, is a typical African rich girl. Asha's appearance is indeed average, but her background and conditions are almost impeccable. Their family owns the largest import and export company in Besa, and the whole city knows the status of the Wekesa family. The department manager in charge of Thailand trade in that company. That year, Asha graduated from university, secretly hid her identity, and entered her own company as an intern. But the day Asha joined the company, Chike recognized her at first sight. Because as early as in a previous annual meeting, Chike had secretly taken a photo of Chairman Weeksa's family. The house in the photo was so magnificent and luxurious that it made Chike, a poor boy, feel itchy. So, when Asha appeared in front of Chike, an idea immediately came to his mind. The opportunity had come. When the interns were assigned, Chike was the first to step forward and chose Asha to join his department. From then on, Chike started using his cliched but tried and true routine, the handsome boss hooking up with the ordinary intern. Although it sounds disgusting, it works. Before long, they were together. Asha loved Chike so much that she was almost obsessed with him. Asha thought everything Chike did was cute. Even his tone-deaf singing was hilarious. Asha loves to listen to Chike singing Jerusalema the most. She even set the song as her cell phone ringtone and plays it on a loop as if it were a spell. Their relationship was soon discovered by the chairman. At first, the chairman, Jabari Wekesa, was adamantly against it, but for some reason, after meeting Chike in person, his attitude suddenly changed. He seemed to think that this boy was barely suitable for his ordinary-looking daughter. So, to everyone's surprise, Chike and Asha officially got married a year ago. Many colleagues in the company were talking behind Chike's back, saying that he was lucky. Chike was quite happy with it. After all, the day after he and the rich girl got their marriage certificate, they went to Thailand for their honeymoon. But he didn't expect that this trip would completely change his life. One day in Thailand, Asha suddenly disappeared without leaving any clues. Chike called the police immediately, but the police investigated for nearly a month without making any progress. Chike was extremely disappointed and had to return to Africa. When he returned to their newlywed villa, he pushed the door open and was surprised to see Weeksa's family sitting in the living room. Without any explanation, Jabari Wekesa went berserk with Chike and beat him up on the spot, and finally kicked him out of the house. Chike covered his face and yelled, "Asha and I are a legal couple. This house is our joint property." But Jabari Wekesa just smiled coldly and then called in the family's private lawyer. It turned out that Asha had voluntarily given up all her properties in order to marry Chike, including the villa, which was also registered under the name of her sister Nia Wekesa. But this was just the beginning of the nightmare. The next day, just as Chike was about to go to work, he received a dismissal notice from the Human Resources Department. Chike rushed to the company, but couldn't even get through the door because the door card had been deactivated. The security guard also unceremoniously pushed Chike out of the office building. Just when Chike was almost in despair, A pair of creamy white high heels appeared in front of him. Chike looked up and saw Nia, Asha's younger sister, who was more delicate and beautiful than her older sister. Nia gently took Chike to a nearby cafe. She comforted him. "Brother-in-law, don't be too sad. It's really not all your fault. My dad was just too excited," Nia advised softly. "Don't worry, I will definitely help you return to the company after a while." Chike was confused. Looking at the girl in front of him who was prettier than his wife, he couldn't help but wonder, "Why are you helping me?" Nia blushed and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, I just like to help you." Chike was stunned. At that moment, he felt hope rekindled. This girl was not only beautiful, but also had a loving look. She was like a life-saving straw sent by God. Chike thought to himself, what a good girl. Chike discovered that Nia Wekes's feelings for him were more passionate and direct than those for Asha Wekesa. After just 3 months of dating, the two decided to get married. Chike's colleagues were no longer envious, but full of admiration. After all, the 2 daughters of the Wekesa family fell in love with this man from a commoner background and were even willing to marry him. Jabari Wekesa was naturally unhappy when he learned about Chike and Nia's relationship. But Nia was a typical, love-brained person, even more persistent than her sister, so he had to compromise in the end. However, the old fox Jabari was not so easy to admit defeat. He used his old tricks again and transferred Nia's assets one by one. Chike didn't care. He had a better plan ready. During the period before the marriage, Chike was always drunk, and once he drank too much, he would repeatedly mention Asha. Every time Nia heard Chike say this, she would start crying or heartbroken like a crumpled piece of paper. The very next day after they got their marriage certificate, Nia suddenly said she wanted to go to Thailand again. She wanted to find her sister again. Chike didn't refuse, and the two returned to the old place together. That night, the tour guide enthusiastically recommended a very special underground show. Chike had nothing to do, so he didn't think much about it and took Nia with him. It started off normal, but soon the atmosphere started to get weird. The host Ayanda led a group of people with strange appearances on stage. Some were missing arms, some had legs bent like old branches, and some had facial features almost reshaped, like monsters. The last person to appear was a castrated elderly transgender man, his skin and flesh pierced by silver rings, which pulled and tore him with every step he took, causing people to feel excruciating pain just by watching. The audience in the venue began to scream, and some women even cried softly. Chike turned his head to look at Nia, but she was not afraid at all. "Brother-in-law, it's quite interesting." Chike couldn't help but laugh. "It will be more interesting later." Nia grinned, innocent and playful. "Have you seen it? I work in Thailand for half a year, and I've seen a lot of shows like this. You are really well informed." As she spoke, Nia leaned against Chike's arms, like a little bird. At this time, the host Ayanda shouted from the stage, "Welcome our fruit girl." 2 burly men came out carrying a stretcher with a woman lying on it. She was naked, with only a large mask on her face. Even though the stage was a little dim, the audience could still see that the woman's whole body was red and her skin seemed to have rotted into pieces. If the previous weird performances had not already refreshed everyone's bottom line, this scene would probably have made people scream. Until a strong man suddenly turned her over. There was an uncontrollable cry of surprise from the crowd. The skin on her chest was also rotten, but what made people unable to look away were the 3 oases covered with rotten flesh, moss-like grass tissue that grew out of the skin and produced blood-red fruits. That thing exuded an evil aura, yet strangely attracted people's attention, like a forbidden fruit. The host Ayanda announced with a smile, "Everyone can pick some fruit, $10 apiece." As the stretcher approached, a foul smell hit me in the face, like the smell of fermented blood mixed with ointment, which was nauseating. Someone actually reached out and picked the fruit. Every time her hair was plucked, the girl would let out a moan that made people reverie. The sound was a mixture of pain, numbness, and desire, which made people shudder. The stretcher was getting closer and closer to them. Chike glanced at Nia and said, "Do you want to pick one?" Nia said nothing, but stared at the half of the girl's face. Her eyes gradually solidified. Her brows were knitted tightly, and her expression was extremely serious. When the stretcher finally arrived in front of them, Chike's cell phone suddenly rang. The sudden ringing of the bell broke the eerie atmosphere and attracted the attention of many viewers. The lifeless fruit girl suddenly sat up. She made a harsh and rapid sound, completely different from the seductive look she had just shown. The next second, she suddenly stretched out her hand and rushed towards Chike and Nia. Chike was startled and tried to pull Nia away, but Nia seemed to be frozen, standing there motionless. Fortunately, the strong man rushed over in time, grabbed the girl's hair, and dragged her back. Then, a staff member hurried over and gave the girl an injection on her rotten shoulder. She immediately went limp and was quickly carried away by 2 big men. but her mouth was still whimpering and wailing all the way. The theater manager apologized to Nia with a big smile on his face. "Oh, I'm sorry, miss. It was an emergency just now. Our fruit girl is usually very docile, and something must have gone wrong today. I will prepare a small gift for you to apologize later." Chike patted Nia's shoulder gently, trying to reassure her, but found that her whole body was shaking so badly that even her lips were turning pale. Nia turned around, tears welling up in her eyes. "Sister, brother-in-law." Chike hurriedly asked Nia, "What's wrong? Are you scared?" Nia's face turned pale, and her voice was so low that it was almost inaudible. "That's my sister. It's my sister." As he spoke, Nia Wekesa turned suddenly and rushed over there. The woman on the stretcher seemed to sense her approach. She struggled to sit up and rushed towards Nia through the crowd. Just as the two were about to hold each other's hands, a sturdy man suddenly swung his fist and hit the woman hard in the face. She didn't have time to scream before she fell down like a puppet with its strings cut. Nia still wanted to rush over to save people. Chike Leko grabbed her and pointed behind her alertly. Several burly men were approaching them from different directions. Chike whispered to Nia that it was too dangerous here. Nia was just a young girl who had never experienced the world. Her face turned pale and she stood there, scared and at a loss. Chike immediately held Nia's hand, followed the evacuating crowd, took her with him, and quickly left the scene. After walking out of the dim building, Nia's hand was still tightly holding Chike's arm. "Brother-in-law, what should we do? How can we save my sister?" Chike took a deep breath. "Are you sure you really saw it clearly?" Nia's eyes were filled with tears, but her tone was extremely firm. "I really saw it clearly. It must be my sister." Half of her mask fell off, but the mole at the corner of her mouth is still there. Chike's heart tightened when he heard this, and he held her hand tightly. "Great, we finally found her. But that kind of place, the two of us are not enough." Nia's breathing became rapid and her eyes were confused and anxious. "Yes, you are right. What should we do now?" "Let's call the police." Nia hurriedly took out her cell phone. Chike quickly held Nia's hand and said, "No, can't you see? It's so chaotic here. Maybe the police are in cahoots with him. If we fail to rescue your sister, we will have to go with her." "Then, what should we do?" Nia choked out, tears flowing uncontrollably. Chike was also very anxious. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Why not inform your dad? He has many connections and may have a way." Nia nodded as if grasping a life-saving straw, and her expression recovered a little. Chike continued, "And your two brothers, come along, it will be easier with more people." Nia looked at Chike with red eyes and suddenly asked, "Aren't you doing business in Pattaya? Don't you know anyone here?" Chike smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Silly girl, I am just a wage earner in your family. If they give me face, it is also because of your father's face." Nia nodded and quickly took out her cell phone to contact home. After hearing about the situation, Jabari Wekesa immediately became nervous and flew over with his two sons Malik and Omari the next day. On the surface, Chike acted anxiously as he helped them arrange their stay, but in fact, he was secretly delighted in his heart. His plan was already half completed. Jabari was indeed financially strong, and he began to mobilize resources as soon as he landed. He immediately contacted the local police officer. But the police here are notorious for taking bribes and never doing anything. A few days passed, and there was no progress at all. Jabari's face became more and more ugly, but he could do nothing. In a foreign country, no matter how rich you are, sometimes you feel like your hands and feet are tied. Finally, Jabari made up his mind to solve the problem himself. The one who was more familiar with the place was Chike. Jabari simply handed over the leadership to him, and the whole family listened to his arrangements. That night, Chike brought Weeks' family to the door of a remote tower. "The people here can help us, but I'm afraid I won't be able to come back if I go in alone. So let's go in together. With more people, they won't dare to do anything wrong." Jabari nodded his head in approval, patting Chike on the shoulder. "Okay, we'll listen to you." So Chike took the Weeks family into the tower. In the tower, the so-called big brother gave Chike the money for 4 heads as agreed. Yes, Chike sold out Weeks' family. His movements were as skillful as when he sold Asha Wekesa. Chike left with the heavy box of money. His father-in-law, Jabari Wekesa, stood there, his face flushed, unable to believe what he saw. "You beast!" Jabari began to roar. "You should go to hell." His voice was full of hatred. "I will kill you." The roar almost tore his throat. Several tall bodyguards immediately stepped forward, forcibly held down Jabari's shoulders, and someone directly covered his mouth. Nia Weksa's eldest brother, Malik Wekesa, roared and broke free from his restraints. He ran desperately towards the guard post nearby, obviously wanting to call the police. Chike Leko stood there, even with a sneer on his face, as if he had expected this scene. Sure enough, within 3 minutes, several policemen pinned Malik down and escorted him back like a criminal. These policemen have been well fed and turned a blind eye to the deal in front of them. That is a road paved with money. How can these fools shake it? Chike left with the box of cash, his steps brisk, as if he was marching to the beat of victory. The Wekesa family owes me. This time, I will take it back bit by bit. Chike sneered in his heart. As soon as the money was saved, Chike bought a ticket back to Mbesa. Just as the plane took off, Chike took out the transfer agreement from his bag. That was the company equity document that he forced Jabari and his two brothers-in-law to sign. Without hesitation, Chike called his lawyer and officially started the process of taking over the company. The entire procedure went extremely smoothly, and in less than a week, Chike had become the new chairman. That day was just before the National Day holiday, so Chike went to the company on purpose. As soon as he entered the company, he saw all the employees lined up to welcome him. Everyone was respectful to Chike and always called him chairman. At that moment, Chike stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in his office, overlooking the entire city, feeling extremely happy. Chike was determined to reward these employees and celebrate. The celebration is scheduled for October 8th, which also happens to be Chike's birthday. The fate of this company and I was restarted on the same day, Chike said with emotion. Chike spent a huge amount of money for this celebration, not only renting a luxurious venue, but also inviting several popular local singers to perform live. The lights on the stage were bright, and the audience was applauding. Everyone was congratulating Chike and praising his superb skills and incredible luck. Chike went on stage and was about to give a passionate speech when there was a commotion outside the door. A group of uniformed law enforcement officers rushed in and quickly surrounded Chike. Chike's face suddenly changed, and his heart sank. Could it be that he was discovered? This is impossible, he murmured. The leading official handed over a document with an expressionless face. Chike reached out to take it, looked down, and froze in place as if struck by lightning. It was a court summons. It clearly stated, accumulated debt of 12 billion naira. At the same time, Chike received a text message from a Thai number on his phone. Fool. Enjoy your debt. Damn it. Chike couldn't help but swear, his eyes instantly filled with surprise and suspicion. He called back immediately, but there was no response. Just as he was getting annoyed, the company's legal affairs lawyer, Lumo, came over and said, Chairman, the money for this banquet has not been paid yet. Chike looked at him coldly and said sarcastically, Thabitai Lumo, since when did you start managing finances? But Lumo seemed to be unconcerned with his sarcasm and still smiled and said, As far as I know, Jabari Wekesa started to transfer group assets on a large scale as early as a year ago. A year ago? Chike frowned. That was when Asha disappeared and Nia started to approach him more frequently. Lumo continued, Just yesterday, Jabari asked me to help transfer the last of the domestic funds out of the country. Yesterday? Chike's pupils shrank and his face turned pale. He clearly had everyone in Wekesa's family under his control, so how could Jabari still move freely? Where did the funds go? Chike asked in a low voice. Lumo smiled lightly, with a hint of sarcasm in his eyes. Thailand. Thailand. These two words exploded in Chike's mind like thunder. Chike suddenly understood. Since he returned to China, everything from the company name change, document preparation, and transfer process had gone too smoothly, as if everyone had been waiting for him to take the initiative to jump into this trap. It turns out that Chike was just a scapegoat from the beginning to the end. Jabari, the cunning old fox, had seen through his ambitions long ago. That's why Jabari let Nia approach Chike and set up this whole situation. Chike gnashed his teeth and clenched his fist in anger. This old dog is really cruel. Just then, a shout suddenly came from a distance. The chairman is there. A dozen men in suits quickly surrounded Chike. They were the core executives of the Wekesa group, and each of them had anxiety and anger on their faces. Chairman Chike Leko, what happened to the 12 billion debt? Yes, Mr. Leko, we need an explanation. The sound of the crowd was getting closer and closer, causing Chike's heartbeat to suddenly speed up. Chike turned hastily and rushed towards the exit. Where are you going, Chairman? Someone shouted, and someone immediately followed. The entire conference hall suddenly fell into chaos and disarray. Just when Chike was at a loss and almost surrounded, a strong hand suddenly pulled him. Chike stumbled and was pulled into a side room. As the door closed, Chike could see who was standing in the room. It was the lawyer he had never liked very much, Thabitai Lumo. Lumo had a meaningful smile on his face. He took out an envelope from his suit pocket and said calmly, You only have two choices now. Lumo calmly, his eyes full of wariness. He didn't deal with this person very often, but every time he met him, it was not a pleasant experience. Lumo knew much more about Weeksa's family than he let on. What do you mean? Chike asked in a low voice. Lumo shrugged. First, you can choose to go out and take the responsibility. But in addition to the 12 billion, there are some hidden debts that you don't even know about. When you walk out this door, you may end up in prison. Lumo paused, shook the envelope in his hand. Second, here are 2 tickets, flying to Pattaya tonight. You and I will go together. Chike frowned and said nothing. Lumo suddenly took a step closer and lowered his voice. Aren't you curious how is the Wekesa family doing in Thailand now? These words were like a needle that pierced Chike's heart. Of course he knew this was a trap, but he had no choice. If he stayed here, he would only die faster. I'll go with you, Chike said in a deep voice. Lumo grinned. He who knows the times is a wise man. That night, Lumo arranged a new identity for Chike. The next morning, the two arrived at Utapao Airport in Thailand together. As soon as Chike got off the plane, he was surrounded by 4 people. Chike was stuffed into a van, his eyes covered with a black cloth, and the only sound he could hear was the rolling wheels. It was a bumpy ride, and when we got off the bus again, it was already dark. Chike was pushed into a brightly lit mansion. The crystal chandelier in the hall was so bright that Chike couldn't open her eyes for a moment. At this moment, a laughing voice sounded from above Chike's head. Husband, you are really infatuated. You come to me again so soon. This voice Chike is so familiar, it's Asha Wekesa. In an instant, Chike realized that he was wrong. He thought he was the hunter, but he was the food. In fact, it might have been destined since the day Chike joined Wekesa. There can only be one explanation for the Wekesa family's deliberate targeting of Chike himself. He was recognized. It seems that the plastic surgery that year did not completely change Chike. The winner is the king, the loser is the bandit. Chike smiled bitterly in his heart. If that's the case, then face it. Yes, honey, I'm here to see you. How have you been lately? After his eyes gradually adjusted to the light, Chike could see Asha's appearance again. Compared to her pure and simple appearance back then, Asha now wears heavy makeup. The only thing that hasn't changed is that she is still disgusting. Sister, why are you wasting time talking to this guy? Why not just kill him? The voice came from Nia Wekesa, who was also at the scene, and her appearance didn't change much. Chike sneered and shook his head. So you went to so much trouble to screw me and trick me into coming to Thailand just to take my life? Asha waved her hands, her smile as cold as a knife. How could that be, Brother Kwabena? My father said, make the best use of everything. Squeeze out every drop of value from the resources. Asha took a step closer and said in a gentle but frightening tone, you still have a lot of value as a human. Kwabena Zumo. No one has called him by this name for 20 years. It turns out that the Wekesa family already knew who Chike was. Chike looked up and gritted his teeth and said, I want to see Jabari Wekesa. Asha sneered, meet my dad? He's busy. How can he have time to see you? Who said I don't have time? My nephew wants to see me. How dare I not come? A steady male voice interrupted Asha. Chike looked back and saw Jabari Wekesa walking slowly from the end of the corridor. Jabari had a seemingly friendly but extremely hypocritical smile on his face. Nephew Kwabena, I wanted to leave a way out for your family, but you chose to fall into the trap. Tell me, what should I do? Jabari said as he walked in front of Chike. Their eyes met, and the air froze instantly. Chike's eyes were like knives, and he roared in a low voice. When did you recognize me? You have been acting for so many years, aren't you tired? Jabari smiled softly, as if he didn't hear the question at all. After all, you two, father and son, are really the benefactors of my life. 20 years ago, I was about to go bankrupt, and it was old Kwabena who saved me. 20 years later, I was targeted by the police, and young Kwabena came to die again. Jabari sighed. Tisk tsk, 2 generations of grandfather and grandson, both are good people. 20 years ago, when Chike was still called Kwabena Zumo, he was a rich kid growing up in Lagos. Chike's father, Kofi Zumo, is a well-known local entrepreneur, and his best friend is Jabari Wekesa. Jabari is in business just like Kofi, but his fortunes are constantly up and down, and he often loses more than he gains. Until that year, Jabari went to Thailand and said that he had found a big project that could turn things around. Kofi was moved by Jabari's eloquent words and decided to go abroad with him. But who knew that this trip would be their last? On the 3rd day, Kofi called back from Thailand without saying a word, just asking for money. Chike's mother, Mama Zola, a woman without her own opinion and accustomed to obeying her husband, did not hesitate to send the money when Kofi asked for it. By the time Chike's grandmother, Bibi Amina, found out, the family's funds had been drained. Immediately afterwards, Kofi completely lost contact, as if he had disappeared from the face of the earth. Half a year later, Jabari returned to China alone and brought back a transfer document for Kofi's shares. Jabari said that Kofi lost all his property gambling in Thailand, and he used money to redeem Kofi from the casino. In order to repay his kindness, Kofi transferred the company and all his property to Jabari. Mama Zola anxiously asked Kofi where were his people. Jabari just said one thing. Kofi committed suicide out of shame because he gambled away all his family property. Such a ridiculous statement instantly plunged the Zumo family into the abyss. Not long after, Mama Zola committed suicide, and Bibi Amina followed. Kwabena became an orphan and was sent to an orphanage, where he was given a new name, Chike Leko, and started a new life. But for Chike, he was already dead that year. Years later, Chike finally gets the chance to confront Jabari. "Why did you kill my dad?" Chike stared at Jabari. Jabari smiled and moved closer, his voice carrying a hint of malice. "Nephew, don't say anything careless. I didn't harm him. I said, your father is my benefactor. How could I harm him?" Jabari leaned forward slightly and lowered his voice. "I'll tell you a secret. Your father is still alive." Chike's heart was shaken, and he stood up suddenly. "Are you telling the truth?" "Of course." Jabari looked relaxed. "Then where is he?" Chike asked anxiously. Jabari didn't answer, but just laughed. Asha and Nia Wekesa also laughed, and the laughter was strange and piercing. Chike felt a strong sense of uneasiness. "Where is he?" Nia laughed and said provocatively, "Brother-in-law, you have a really bad memory. Didn't you just meet him a few days ago?" Chike was stunned. "Didn't you take me there?" The old man with the silver ring was so exquisite. "You also said you liked gold rings. When the time comes, the two of you, one with gold and the other with silver, will be quite a sight." Chike's mind flashed back to that strange figure. The silver ring, the heavy makeup, and nothing else. "Your father has been our family's cash cow for many years." Jabari's eyes flashed coldly. "There are so many people who have ordered him. I think after you clean yourself up, you might be worth more than him." Asha also came up and said in a frivolous tone, "Husband, do you know what your father's nickname is?" "Dimple. I gave it the same name as our dog. Your dad and that dog have a special bond." Chike's face was distorted. "You beasts, I'm going to kill you." Suddenly, the door of the hall was pushed open, and the sharp sound of metal chains colliding was heard. Chike felt a chill on his back and couldn't help but look back. Under the light, Chike saw the man clearly. It was him, Kofi Zumo. A puppet sewn together with silver rings, with empty eyes and a weird smile on the corners of his mouth. "Dad," Chike murmured anxiously. "Haha, hello, boss." The man bowed and nodded to everyone around him. The silver ring tugged at his skin and also tugged at Chike's heart. "Dad," Chike finally couldn't help it and shouted. The man seemed frightened and apologized repeatedly. "Boss, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Then he began to slap his face frantically. The silver ring was torn off by his nails and blood was dripping. "Stop hitting me, Dad. Look at me. I'm Xiaoshuan Kwabena." The man who was once elegant, successful, and praised as a child of destiny has now become like this. Chike felt completely heartbroken and even hoped that his father had really died. "Jabari Wekesa," Chike roared. Jabari shrugged. "Don't get excited. Watch carefully and learn from him. You will have to fight in the future. He is very famous." "I fuck your ancestors." Chike cursed. "Idiot." Nia rushed over and stomped on Chike's face. The heel of her high heels went straight into his ear. There was a crackling sound in his ear canal, as if something was breaking. Chike's consciousness suddenly became clear, but tears could not stop flowing. "Oh, Xiaomin, you're already an adult, but you're still so anxious." Jabari chuckled and turned his head. "Don't hurt the person. It will be hard to sell." In a trance, Chike heard someone pleading in a low voice. "Boss, let the child go. He is still young." "I will do it. I can replace him." Kofi Zumo, who had always been timid and cowardly, now spoke tremblingly. Chike Leko was stunned. "Why? Did he remember me?" "Dad," he shouted excitedly. But Kofi Zumo kept his head down, as if he didn't hear anything. At this time, Jabari Wekesa laughed excitedly as if he had suddenly discovered something interesting. "Hey, Kofi Zumo, you're finally awake." Jabari grabbed Kofi's hair and forced his face to turn around, forcing him to look at Chike. "You're almost useless, so I'll ask your son to take over your job. Isn't that perfect? Look at him. He looks so much like you when you were young." The moment Chike looked into his father's eyes, he saw fear in his father's cloudy eyes. "Dad, I am Kwabena. I am Kwabena Zumo." Jabari laughed even louder. "Your son is much more handsome than you were back then. The queue of girls who like him will definitely be longer." "Kwabena, it's Kwabena Zumo," Kofi muttered to himself, his face flushed red. Suddenly, Kofi turned his head and looked at Jabari. "You promised me. You said that as long as I obeyed you, you would not touch my son. You said so." Asha Wekesa and Nia Wekesa beside them burst into laughter, as if they were watching a lively drama. "Dad, this scene is so interesting. No wonder you had to spend more money to bribe that bastard lawyer to get the Zumo kid here." Jabari smiled, and suddenly raised his hand and slapped Kofi twice. "You old man, you dare to talk to me like that. You are looking for death." After those 2 slaps, Kofi fell to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. He made no sound and fell limply to the ground. Dad, Chike struggled frantically in the ropes. Old dog, come at me if you dare. Don't hit him. Dad, what's wrong with you? Dad. But before Chike could crawl over, Asha kicked him back hard. Chike saw that Asha's eyes were actually shining. It was excitement. The 2 burly men who brought Kofi in again roughly grabbed the father and son and dragged them to a closed room in the backyard. Before entering the door, Chike smelled a strong and pungent smell of blood. Inside, 2 fully armed medical staff were ready to go. Asha approached him with a smile and said, "Hubby, you are so lucky. The conditions are good now, and there are doctors to help you with the surgery." Kofi was in a terrible situation back then. It was our little Dimple who bit himself, and he almost died. But he was lucky and survived. "You crazy woman." Chike kicked Asha angrily. But before he could touch Asha's body, he was pulled back by the strong man. They roughly pressed Chike onto the operating table, and 2 doctors began cutting his pants. Chike raised his head with difficulty and stared at Jabari. "You old dog, just wait and see. You have done so many immoral things, and one day you will get your comeuppance." Jabari snorted coldly and said disdainfully, "Huh, you're still worrying about me now? Let me tell you, your father was my first order, and you are my last order. Over the past 20 years, I have sold tens of thousands of people, but now I am very clean, the cleanest businessman in all of Africa." Chike stared at Jabari and actually laughed. "Huh, the cleanest businessman? You are really shameless." The doctor began to inject the anesthetic, and a chill crept up along my blood vessels. The smile on Jabari's face suddenly disappeared. He turned around and ordered the thugs beside him, "Go, wake up that old bitch. I want him to see with his own eyes how the Zumo family bloodline is cut off." The effects of the drug gradually took effect, and Chike's vision became blurry. Just when Chike was about to lose consciousness, a loud noise came from outside the door. He was shocked. Here they come. They are finally here. When Chike regained consciousness, the first thing he saw was the face of Officer Lumo, the former lawyer Thabatai Lumo. Lumo and the police team have controlled everyone at the scene, and the whole space is filled with tension. Officer Lumo walked to the operating table and untied Chike himself. Lumo said, "You did a great job. The whole process was recorded, but it will be difficult to remove the device from your scalp." Chike raised his hand and touched his head. Under the dim light of the operating room, a tiny bright spot flashed faintly in his scalp. "It's okay." Chike responded softly, but the pain was not what he was thinking about. Chike rushed to the man and said urgently, "Dad." Kofi Zumo looked up at Chike, then lowered his head in panic, his eyes evasive. Chike took off his coat without hesitation and put it on Kofi's thin, scarred body. Kofi suddenly raised his head to look at Chike, his mouth twitching slightly, and he said in a trembling voice, "Kid, you may have recognized the wrong person." Kofi's calloused hands clenched his clothes tightly, like a child who longed for a toy but was afraid of being rejected. Chike's nose felt sore, and he hugged Kofi tightly. "You are my dad. No matter what you become, you are still my dad. Don't think too much. I will take you home." When Kofi heard the word, "go home," his body began to tremble as if he had been electrocuted. "Let's go home, and I'll take care of you." Chike repeated again. Kofi lowered his head, and his shoulders twitched even more. Chike held his shoulders and hugged him, only to find that the clothes covering his chest were wet with tears. "Get out of the way." Suddenly, a quick shout came from behind. It was Police Officer Lumo. "You little bastard. How dare you ruin my good thing? Even if I die today, I will take you with me." Before the roar had died down, Jabari Wekesa broke free from the person who was suppressing him, and he was holding a gun in his hand. Chike turned his head sharply, and almost at that moment, a gunshot rang out. But Chike didn't feel any pain. Instead, he felt a heavy pressure, like being hit hard by something, and a hot stream flowed down his cheek. Kofi Zumo looked at Chike with gentle eyes, just like when he and Mama Zola picked up Chike from school at the school gate. "Kwabena, Daddy is really happy that you can come and take me home." The scene changed, and the voice of Officer Lumo rang in my ears. "My name is Thabatai Lumo, and I am a criminal investigation officer of the Nigerian police. 2 years ago, Lumo was ordered to investigate a huge transnational human fraud gang. The leader behind this organization was none other than Jabari Wekesa. In order to get closer to his target, Thabatai disguised himself as a lawyer and lurked beside Jabari Wekesa for 2 years. During this period, he and his colleagues worked together to solve several related cases. But Jabari was extremely cunning and never showed up in person, but only operated through his subordinates. Lumo only caught scapegoats and was never able to effectively strike against Jabari Wekesa. Until recently, Jabari Wekesa seemed to realize that his identity was exposed and began to transfer assets frantically. When Thabatai was at a loss, a young man named Chike Leko appeared in his sight. This man was not simple. On the surface, he was Jabari's son-in-law, but in fact, he had a deep hatred for him. Jabari once asked Chike to come back to take the blame and wanted to use him to escape to Thailand. Thabatai sensed an opportunity and quickly approached Chike. Unexpectedly, Chike agreed to cooperate without much hesitation. In order to obtain direct evidence, Lumo implanted scalp and ear canal monitoring in Chike. The process was extremely painful and no anesthesia was allowed. Thabatai once thought he would not be able to hold on. As a result, Chike took on everything without saying a word, which made Thabatai secretly admire him. The mission went more smoothly than expected, and Chike was picked up as soon as he arrived at the airport. Lumo followed him and tracked him all the way to Jabari's hideout. However, just as the action was moving forward, something unexpected happened. Chike's father showed up. Kofi was tortured to the point of being torn to pieces. Even though Thabatai had heard about the cruelty of the Wekesa family, he was still shocked to see it with his own eyes. Chike's emotions fluctuated greatly, but in the end the mission was accomplished. Lumo finally subdued Jabari, but unexpectedly, Jabari Wekesa, the old fox, was so skilled that he suddenly broke free and shot Chike. At the critical moment, Chike's father blocked the bullet. Seeing his father being shot and falling to the ground, Chike completely lost control and rushed forward to die with Jabari. No one could persuade him to stop. The scene was chaotic for a while, and it was the police's Hercules who forcibly subdued Chike. Chike was struggling and roaring on the ground with a crazy look in his eyes, and no one could do anything. Thabatai suddenly had an idea and shouted out, "Do you want your father to die in vain?" Chike stopped abruptly and turned to look at him, his face twisted with tears and anger. "Jabari must die. Your father paid for your life. You want to kill him? You'll become a murderer. Are you willing to become a murderer for a beast?" This sentence was like a bucket of cold water, pulling Chike back to reality from his anger. Chike suddenly lost his strength, fell to his knees, and cried heartbreakingly. Thabatai Lumo sighed softly. He is pitiful, but there are more than one like him. Some of them were deceived, and some of their relatives were deceived. But once you believe the scammers dream of getting rich and take that step, your destiny may no longer belong to you. Cherish life and be cautious in socializing. In this world, some people look like human beings, but in fact, they are ghosts.